Imagine walking through the streets of Paris and encountering a man carrying his own head, chanting psalms as he moves. It sounds like a scene from a horror film, but this is one of the most extraordinary and well-documented stories in the history of Christianity. What would you do if you witnessed such an awe-inspiring miracle? This is the story of Saint Denis, the saint who defied death and turned a brutal execution into one of the greatest symbols of faith ever recorded. Chapter 1: Historical context in the 3rd century. As Rome faced one of its greatest internal crises, a singular figure embarked on a mission that would forever change the destiny of France. Denis, a young Italian missionary chosen by Pope Fabian, set out to evangelize a region the Romans called Lutetia, now known as Paris. Ancient Lutetia was a strategic trade center where Gallic and Roman cultures intermingled in a cauldron of religious and political tensions. Druids still held significant influence over the people, and Roman temples dominated the urban landscape. It was in this challenging environment that Denis established the first Christian community. What few know is that Denis did not arrive in Gaul alone. Ancient documents reveal that he led a group of 7 missionaries, each sent to different regions of the territory. While his companions traveled to other cities, Denis chose Lutetia, considered the spiritual heart of Gallic paganism. Denis' method of evangelization was revolutionary for his time. Instead of directly confronting local beliefs, he engaged in dialogue with the population, learned their customs, and often used familiar symbols to explain the Christian message. This unique approach resulted in a surprising number of conversions. Denis' growing influence began to unsettle not only the pagan priests, but also Roman authorities. Emperor Valerian, who initially tolerated Christians, drastically changed his policy after a series of natural disasters and military defeats, which were conveniently attributed to the wrath of the gods against the new religion. Amid this political turbulence, Denis managed to establish a secret network of Christian homes connected by a system of catacombs that still exist beneath the streets of Paris. Archaeologists have recently uncovered evidence of these ancient gatherings, including early Christian symbols etched into the walls of underground tunnels. Chapter 2: The Martyrdom of Saint Denis. At the height of Christian persecution, Emperor Valerian intensified his campaign against the growing influence of the new faith. Pagan priests, fearing a loss of their power over the people, accused Denis not only of witchcraft, but also of conspiracy against Rome. The bishop, who had already converted hundreds in Lutetia, became the primary target. In a public trial, Denis faced his accusers with a serenity that unsettled even the most skeptical. When offered the chance to renounce his faith and sacrifice to the Roman gods, he replied with words that would echo through the centuries: "My life belongs to Christ, and in death I will find eternal life." The site chosen for his execution was no coincidence a hill considered sacred by the locals, now known as Montmartre. Alongside his loyal companions, the deacon Rusticus and the priest Eleutherius, Denis was taken to what his executioners thought would be his end. Then, something extraordinary happened, an event that would forever transform the history of Christianity in France. After his decapitation, witnesses reported that Denis stood up, picked up his own head, and began to walk. Along the way, he is said to have chanted psalms in a clear and melodious voice. For 6 kilometers, Denis walked through the astonished city. The phenomenon attracted a crowd that followed him in reverent silence. Some records from the time mentioned that where his blood drops fell, white flowers instantly bloomed, a detail rarely mentioned in modern retellings. Finally, he stopped at a location he himself had chosen for his final resting place. The exact spot where he fell was initially marked by a small chapel, built by local Christians who risked their own lives to give him a proper burial. What they did not know was that this modest site would grow into one of the most important monuments in French history. Chapter 3: Legacy and Curiosities. The small chapel built on the site where Denis fell grew into the majestic Basilica of Saint Denis, a masterpiece of Gothic architecture that revolutionized the way churches were built in medieval Europe. Its most famous builder, Abbot Suger, introduced the first use of rose windows, creating a spectacle of light that the faithful interpreted as a divine manifestation. A fascinating and little-known detail is that the basilica's walls hold a hidden history of medieval alchemy. Inspired by the saint who united his head with his spiritual body, Suger incorporated alchemical symbols into the architecture, representing the union between the earthly and the divine. For those interested in diving deeper into extraordinary stories of saints like Denis, we recommend our ebook, 50 Saints, Stories and Prayers for Divine Intervention, available in our store. The devotion to Saint Denis grew so significantly that French kings began to see the basilica as a symbol of divine power. The first to choose burial there was Dagobert I in 639, beginning a tradition that lasted over 1,000 years. The royal necropolis would house the remains of 42 kings, 32 queens, and 63 princes and princesses. An intriguing aspect of the devotion to Saint Denis is his association with the healing of migraines and spiritual ailments. Medieval records mention pilgrims who slept inside the basilica and reported dreams of the saint holding his head and offering advice and healing. This tradition persisted until the 18th century. Saint Denis' influence on medieval art created a unique genre of representation, cephalophoric saints, or head-bearing saints. While other saints are also depicted carrying their heads, Denis is considered the first and most significant inspiring masterpieces that can be found in museums across Europe. In French popular culture, Saint Denis became a symbol of resilience and perseverance. His name appears in medieval songs, folktales, and even daily expressions. An old Parisian tradition claimed that on nights of a full moon, his silhouette could be seen walking the path of his final miracle. Chapter 4, The Miracles of Saint Denis. In the 12th century, a young peasant girl, blind from birth, made a desperate pilgrimage to the Basilica of Saint Denis. According to records by Benedictine monks, after spending 3 nights in prayer at the saint's tomb, she gradually regained her sight, first perceiving light, then shapes, and finally colors, a process that the physicians of the time could not explain. During the Black Death of 1348, as Paris lost hundreds of inhabitants daily, a group of faithful organized a procession carrying the relics of Saint Denis through the city streets. Documents from the period recount that in the areas where the procession passed, the death toll dropped dramatically. This event established a tradition lasting centuries. During epidemics, the saint's relics were carried in procession through the city. One of the most intriguing cases occurred in 1429, when Joan of Arc spent a night in vigil at the Basilica of Saint Denis before beginning her mission to liberate Orleans. She later reported having a vision of the saint, who gave her specific instructions on leading the French army. Interestingly, several of the strategies she later employed coincided with Roman military tactics from the 3rd century. In the 17th century, a detailed manuscript recorded the case of a nobleman who suffered from severe migraines that left him sleepless for days. After a novena to Saint Denis, not only was he cured of his pain, but he began having prophetic dreams that helped him avoid a conspiracy against his life. This specific case reinforced the tradition of invoking the saint against headaches. In 1793, during the French Revolution, revolutionaries attempted to destroy Saint Denis' tomb. Witnesses reported an inexplicable phenomenon. Tools broke upon touching the marble of the sepulchre, and several workers described a sensation of paralysis when approaching the site. The tomb was ultimately preserved, and historians today consider this episode crucial to the basilica's survival. A more recent miracle occurred during World War II, when the basilica was struck by bombs during an air raid. While the roof collapsed, Saint Denis relics remained intact, and none of the 200 civilians sheltering inside were harmed. Witnesses described seeing a bluish light protecting the area where people had gathered. The story of Saint Denis transcends religion, making us question the boundaries between faith and reality, between the possible and the miraculous. His legacy lives not only in the magnificent basilica bearing his name or the countless works of art depicting his extraordinary martyrdom, but also in the very essence of what it means to believe in something greater than ourselves. If you were inspired by this incredible story and want access to exclusive content about other saints and martyrs, consider becoming a member of our channel. Members receive early access to our videos and can participate in choosing future topics. Activate the notification bell, subscribe to the channel, and join us on this fascinating journey through the history of faith. May God bless you.